partner Isa and I moved to Greymire Village in mid-July. We barely heard anything about it before arriving. No brochures, no travel blogs, no online weekend trip suggestions whispering its name. It was the kind of town that fell between the cracks of modern curiosity. Not accidentally, I would later suspect. Isa had accepted a teaching job at a tiny school just past the northern boundary of the village. After years of traffic, noise, and tiny apartments, she craved calm, she said. She wanted to breathe pine instead of car fumes. Greymire, with its forested outskirts and cobbled streets, felt like the calm escape she'd always dreamed of. I worked remotely as a graphic illustrator, so I could relocate my setup anywhere that had stable Wi-Fi and a decent desk. So when Isa showed me the quaint cottage listing, I agreed without much hesitation. The house stood near the bend of a circular lane, just beyond the aging community bell tower. It was the smallest place we'd ever lived in, but something about its mossy stone walls and the way it was nestled beneath two towering ash trees made it feel serene, almost eternal. The locals helped us move in before we asked. They showed up with burlap gloves and time-worn smiles, like we were kin coming home after years away. Most appeared to be in their 50s or older. I noticed there weren't any kids around, even though the local schoolhouse, where Isa would teach, was decently sized. A man named Ellis introduced himself as the community liaison. He wore a heavy wool sweater, despite the summer heat, and his handshake lingered longer than it should have. He welcomed us to Greymire, told us about weekly stew gatherings, and added that if we ever needed anything at all, we should visit his place. We're 3 doors down, he said with a grin. The one with red ivy crawling up the glass, you can't miss it. He turned to go, then added like it just occurred to him. If you want to sleep soundly tonight, keep the front lamp on. Just an old local tradition. I opened my mouth to ask, but he'd already turned away and followed the others down the road. That night, Isa and I lay on a mattress in the living room, boxes stacked around us, the air full of old wood. We didn't bother unpacking. Frame was halfway done, but we'd given up. We ate sandwiches off paper plates and let our muscles relax. Isa rested her head on my chest and mumbled, "Did you turn on the outside lamp?" I blinked, remembering Ellis's warning. I hadn't. The brass lantern hanging above the porch had a corroded switch tucked beneath. I told her I'd handle it before we slept. Neither of us asked why, but it just felt simpler to obey. When I stepped outside, the air wasn't quiet. It was still, as if the whole village held its breath. The lantern buzzed on with a soft flick, casting yellow light across the porch steps. In its glow, the shadows pulled back, just slightly more than they should. Maybe it was exhaustion. Maybe my eyes played tricks. As I turned to go back inside, I noticed a figure standing at the road's bend. An older woman, a shawl around her shoulders. I gave a small, uncertain nod, then stepped inside and locked the door. Isa was already asleep, her breath calm even. I lay beside her, thoughts spinning. The village felt too soft, too perfect. I was still trying to name that feeling when a knock tapped on the door. It wasn't loud, just 3 slow knocks, deliberate. I sat up, not sure I'd really heard it. I checked the clock. 1:47 a.m., Isa stirred, her hand clutching the blanket. "Did you hear that?" I whispered. She nodded, hesitant. It sounded like, yeah. I got up this time hoping. I wished I had more than a phone to light the way. The porch lamp still shone through the window, its glow painting faint shadows across the wooden floor. As I neared the front door, I heard no footsteps, no grass shifting under weight. Whoever knocked had either vanished or was still waiting. I paused. When I opened the door, the steps were empty. The night felt frozen. The lamp buzzed softly above. I looked around. Nothing. No shapes, no eyes. Yet the brass knocker was warm, as if freshly touched. I closed the door and tiptoed back to Isla, trying not to wake her. I told myself it had been a mistake, someone lost or confused. By morning, it already felt like some fading dream. We spent the next day unpacking. Greymire lulled you into rhythm, made you forget little strangeness. Most waved if you brought preserves or thick brown loaves. One boy, hollow-eyed, stared from behind his mother's leg. She said he was Micah. He never blinked. That evening, I sat on a bench in our front yard when Ellis strolled past again. He said nothing at first, just studied me. "Settling in okay?" he asked. I nodded. "Yeah, it's quiet." "Peaceful," he corrected. "That's what we treasure here, the peace. Few places still let you hear the wind." Then he added, You did light the lamp last night? Another nod. Yes, though someone knocked. His eyes narrowed, but you didn't open. Not a question. A fact. No, of course not. He seemed satisfied, smiled faintly. Good, it's important we follow our customs. Keep the lamp lit, but never greet visitors past midnight. It's considered rude. I waited for a chuckle. It never came. I see you at stew night, he said, walking away. That night, the lamp flicked on before dusk had even settled. I didn't need reminding, yet at 2:13 a.m. Another knock, this one louder, 3 firm strikes, then silence. I stayed in bed, breath stuck between fear and curiosity. Isla stirred but said nothing. We lay still, counting seconds. The knock never returned. But I swear I saw it, something shift below the door. A shadow, unnaturally long, unmoving, patient. Greymare mornings had a strange hush to them. Even as the sky paled and dew clung to leaves like weeping tears, the air felt heavy. It wasn't peaceful like farmland, where birds trill and tractors rumble. This silence had weight, like a wet wool blanket draped over the world. Isla didn't mind. If anything, she seemed more herself here, happier than city life ever allowed. She hummed while steeping tea, arranged books by color, then height, then theme. Small rituals filled our space. They soothed her. But for me, the charm had started wearing thin. It was all too perfect, too polished. Smiles from neighbors looked practiced, greetings too rehearsed. Every person we passed on our morning walk offered the exact same phrase. A lovely day, isn't it? Always 3 words. Always identical. Even when clouds covered the sun and the wind bit through my coat, it remained, by their account, a lovely day. On Wednesday, Isla met with other teachers at the school. I stayed home, trying to finish a commission, but my screen stayed blank. Every time I raised my stylus, my eyes wandered to the window. Across the street, a man swept his walkway. He'd started before dawn, sweeping endlessly though nothing was there. Just repetition, deliberate, mechanical. I finally stepped outside, needing air. The man paused when I approached. Tall, pale, lips thin. A morning, I said. He nodded. A lovely day, isn't it? I hesitated. A bit chilly, though. His smile didn't budge. A cold keeps the air honest. I didn't know how to reply, so I gave a nod and walked on. Around the corner, I saw 6 homes. Identical paint, identical shutters, same curtain length. Each porch held a flower pot of white lilies, centered perfectly. In each window, a face watched me. Old men, women in nightgowns, a silent boy. No one moved, even when I stopped and stared. No blinking, no motion. I turned and headed home. That night, I didn't sleep. I watched the ceiling, then the window, then back again. Isla slept deeply, as always. The porch lamp burned, though its glow seemed dimmer than before, like something had drained it. At 2:17 a.m., a knock. 4 slow raps this time. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I froze, thinking maybe stillness would protect me. No second knock came, but I heard something else. A hum, low and thick like chanting, though stretched too far, slow like honey melting. It wasn't loud, but filled the house entirely, from attic to baseboards. It came from nowhere and everywhere. When I finally slept, I dreamed of the stone bell tower at town's center. The bell rang, though it was long removed. The sound wasn't metallic. It pulsed, wet, alive. Isla woke me with tea and a kiss. Morning sun caught her hair, made her glow. You look tired, she said, brushing my cheek. Did you hear anything? I asked. She shook her head. Nothing. Slept great. I hesitated, then said, someone knocked again. But there was more. A sound like singing or humming. For a moment, her face shifted. A flash of worry, then it vanished. Maybe it was wind, she said. Too fast. They told me to welcome the guests in Greymire. I wish I never... When I arrived in Greymire, it didn't appear on any map. Just a faint smudge on the GPS, surrounded by endless marshland and crooked trees that leaned like eavesdroppers. I had taken a wrong turn during my road trip, and, by the time I realized, my car sputtered to death by the roadside. No cell service, no passing cars, just the hiss of wind and the low croak of unseen frogs. As dusk approached, I started walking, hoping to find a tow or a phone. That's when I spotted a dim light through the fog, a lantern swaying gently from a crooked porch. Greymire's welcome sign stood just before it, hand-painted, chipped, and sagging. Welcome, traveler. Mind the guests. The town itself was small, 30 houses maybe, all in various states of decay. The air smelled like wet earth and iron. An elderly woman wrapped in layers of wool greeted me from a rocking chair. You're early, she said without smiling. For what? I asked. She looked past me toward the woods. They come at sundown. You'll greet them. Before I could respond, a tall man with a lantern and glassy eyes appeared beside me. Stay the night, he said. Our mechanic's gone. Roads are soft and too tired and confused to argue. I accepted a room in what passed for an inn, a leaning house with lace curtains and walls that groaned like old bones. That night I barely slept. At midnight, I heard footsteps outside. Rhythmic, measured. I peeked through the curtains and saw figures in the street. Tall, thin silhouettes with elongated limbs and heads that tilted too far. They didn't knock. They just stood at each door, watching. By morning, they were gone. So, at breakfast, the innkeeper slid a bowl of gray porridge in front of me. The guests liked your presence. They watched. Who are they? She didn't answer. I tried to leave that day, walked to my car, and found it sunken into the mud, like it had been there for years. The engine was rusted. The tires shredded. Impossible. Back in town, the people avoided my gaze. They muttered about me being chosen early. I demanded answers, and finally, a teenager named Simon pulled me aside behind the bakery. You're marked now, he whispered. You saw them. They saw you. They like new faces. I pressed him for details. They aren't people, he said. They come from the marsh. They don't speak, don't touch, but they need us to see them. Acknowledgement is everything. Acknowledgement shook his head. The marsh takes you. That night, they returned. This time, I stood outside with the others, watching them drift through the streets. Their skin was translucent, pulsing faintly with what looked like veins of fire. They moved like smoke underwater. A girl, no older than 10, stepped forward and offered a flower to one of them. The thing bowed its long neck and took it without a sound. She smiled. The crowd exhaled. It was a ritual. No shattered glass, no throaty knocking, no contorted limbs slipping past the windows. We hadn't heard laughter since the bread night. Only the bell stayed suspended on a small iron hook. We'd mounted beside the table. We never rang it, not once. It was a symbol, a warning, a barrier. Then one afternoon, late September Ellis returned not with pie, not with soup, but with an envelope. It was closed with black wax, unmarked. It's nearly time, he said, as if we had been counting down a clock. We never saw ticking, you've done well. But there's one last step. One final offering. He passed me the envelope. We're no longer outsiders here, no longer intruders. We were remembered. The bell never rang again. The gifts ended, the neighbors ceased. Their nightly offerings no more jam jars or pies or folded messages, but their glances changed warmer, deeper, like we'd crossed some invisible border. We kept the port lamp burning and the hook where the bell had hung. Sometimes I dream of it, the guest, the depth behind its face, how the house seemed to pause when it entered other nights. I dream. I'm outside the door waiting to be invited in, but every morning I wake in the same bed, in the same house, in the same town. And each morning, I walk past the door and feel the air shift just a little, like something beyond the frame is still watching, still waiting, not hungrily, not cruelly, just patiently. Because in Graymire, the doors stay open because in Graymire hospitality is law, and in Graymire, no one is ever forgotten.